As someone who is still learning the ropes of photography, I've been mulling over this question. You've probably done it as well. Does camera image quality really matter? And I mean, of course, we all want our photos to look stunning, right? But how much does the image quality from the sensors and the lenses of our cameras really matter in the grand scheme of things? Now, I am no expert, I'm an amateur photographer, but I've been doing some research, I've come to a few conclusions, and I think they might be interesting to you. So let's get stuck in. First off, let's quickly define what we mean by image quality. Essentially, what we're talking about here is how sharp, clear, and detailed your photos look. And this is affected by a variety of factors, including your camera's sensor, the lens you're using, and even your camera settings. Think of the image quality that you capture in the moment of that scene that you're photographing like being the foundation of a house. The better, the stronger it is, the better the quality, the better the structure that you're going to be able to build on top of it. And as an amateur, it's very easy to get caught up with the idea that you need the latest camera, the latest lenses to take stunning photos. We all see these incredible, amazing images online and think, if only I had that camera or that lens, maybe my photo would look just as good. But is that really the case? Well, let's break it down point by point and see if we can't find some clarity here. Now, the first thing to consider is that different types of photography have different image quality requirements, or, expectations, I guess. Kind of like how you wouldn't wear a tuxedo to go hiking. Different occasions call for different attire. For example, if you're into street photography, you might actually prefer a bit more of a grittier, noisier, vintage look. That's why, and this is becoming ever more popular on YouTube and on social media, some street photographers are going seemingly backwards, right? They're starting to use old film cameras, or they're using Fuji systems, for example, like what I do, and they add film-style filters to their digital photos. They're trying to capture that raw, authentic, vibe of the streets. Conversely, for someone like me who loves nature photography, image quality seems to be a little bit more important. If I'm out in there's not really that much wilderness in the UK, but if I'm out in the proverbial wilderness, I want my landscapes to look as sharp and as detailed as possible, especially if I'm going to really spend a lot of time editing that one photo from the shoot, or I plan on printing them out later on. I want to be able to see every leaf, every rock, every cloud, the light, the diffusion of the light. I want to see all of that in its stunning clarity. I'm trying to capture, and this sounds massively cheesy, kind of gross, but I'm trying to capture the beauty that was in that moment in its purest form. But that, of course, is just me. I'm a beginner. It's interesting to look at famous photographers and see how they approach image quality. It's like peeking behind the curtain and seeing, sometimes to a certain extent, what makes their work so special. For example, take Ansel Adams. He was all about technical perfection, and he used large format cameras to capture every little detail in now what are iconic landscapes. His photos are like a window into another world. They're so sharp and clear that even though they're in black and white, right, you feel like you could step into them. On the other hand, you have someone like Galen Rowell, who was known for his mountaintop and climbing photos. He often used a very simple 35mm camera with a cheap, essentially crappy wide-angle lens paired with a lightweight telephoto zoom when he was doing his photography. Why? Because when you're scaling a mountain, you need gear that's light and easy to use. You can't be lugging around a huge camera setup, or it's not going to be comfortable to lug around a huge camera setup when you're trying to reach a large peak, a summit before sunset. So, with that said, who took better photos? Well, that's pretty subjective. It's like asking whether you like vanilla ice cream or chocolate ice cream. It all comes down to personal preference. One is super detailed, one is less detailed, maybe slightly more, again, this is subjective, but maybe slightly more epic. But it goes to show that the best, right, the best photographs don't mean most expensive gear or most technically advanced image capture processing system. The best camera is the one that you've got in your hand at the moment you want to capture the image. And then if you go a layer deeper than that, it's the one that allows you to capture it in your own unique way. Now, the next point is a bit of a trap that I fell into when I first got started with my personal landscape photography. So even if you have the fanciest camera and the fanciest lens, your camera settings are still going to dramatically affect your image quality that you get when you throw the image on your computer to start editing it. You can think of it like this. It's like having all of the ingredients of a gourmet meal, but if you don't know how to cook them, then you're never going to get the best results. Aperture, shutter speed, ISO, And there's a bunch of other things on top of that, but they're the main 3 settings, right, that we're all focused on. They all play a real key role in how your final image looks. And with all this said, the pros out there might have found a better way of doing this. But as an amateur photographer myself, I like to keep things as simple as possible. I'm not trying to win any awards, not quite just yet. And so I'm trying to focus on getting the shot rather than fiddling with settings. For example, I might shoot at a slightly higher ISO to avoid camera shake, even if that means there's going to be a little bit more noise in my photos. Or, and I find myself in this position somewhat regularly because I'm late up the hill or the mountain that I'm trying to photograph. If the light is fading and I'm trying to capture a fleeting moment, I'm probably going to, not even probably, I'm absolutely going to prioritize getting the composition set up and right, rather than spending the majority of that finite amount of time I've got before the sun drops below the horizon trying to get the perfect camera settings. So, sometimes you've got to make compromises to get the shot. Your camera settings or composition or whatever it is, there's all these variables. That's what makes photography exciting, right? And sometimes you've got to choose between essentially 2 great opportunities, and you can't always have both. My advice here is to go with your gut and use that to make your decision in the moment. And something that absolutely plagues me and absolutely plagues other amateur photographers, especially when we're trying to be all fancy and use mainly manual settings on our camera, is that getting your camera settings just slightly wrong, even though you think that they're right, you put the time in to put them in place. If you get them slightly wrong, you're going to affect your image quality as well. Going a little bit too high in the ISO, you might blow out the highlights. Or taking a portrait and having the wrong aperture so you don't blow out the background, have that shallow depth of field. Well, that can lead your photograph looking like it was taken on an iPhone rather than a big expensive SLR. Okay, now, aside from the usual screw-ups that we all make with our camera equipment and the camera settings every now and again, new technology also can obviously affect the quality of the image that we're pulling from a sensor, sticking on a screen, and then maybe printing out, maybe sharing on social media. One thing is for sure, camera technology has come an absolutely massive way in just the past 5 years or so. It's like we are living in the future. We've got cameras with insanely high megapixel counts and an incredible low light performance. I've got 2 systems. I've got a Sony a7R system, 60 megapixel sensor, incredible megapixels, right? And I've got a Fuji APS-C camera system as well for traveling and anytime I don't want to carry a ton of glass with me. And the low light performance from that is incredible. The detail, it's a 40 megapixel image sensor crammed into that camera as well. It's mind-blowing, the technology that's right there within your hands these days. It's like having a superpower. You can shoot in almost any condition and still get amazing photos. Now, I didn't shoot film cameras growing up, and I'm probably never going to shoot film. I might eat those words on this channel in the future, right? But right now, I have no intention of ever shooting film. I jumped straight into digital photography, and I'm probably going to continue down that pathway. And so even though I'm positive about the camera technology these days, I have no idea how good we've got it because I didn't shoot film back in the day. I've only ever used autofocus cameras, for example. Obviously, I will manual focus in certain situations. I've never had to manual focus and had one exposure to get the shot. That is crazy to me. But this is all both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, it's easier than ever to take high quality photos. Most of the time, you don't need to be really a technical genius to get great shots. But then on the other hand, well, it can be somewhat overwhelming trying to choose the right gear, how to set it all up, because it's all just so frigging good. There are many options out there, and it can feel like trying to pick a needle out of a haystack. My advice on the gear front is just don't get caught up in the numbers. A camera with a few less megapixels or slightly lower ISO capabilities is still going to take amazing photos in the right hand. It's like comparing apples to oranges. They're both delicious, even though they might be a little bit different. So if you're looking at gear to improve your image quality, just find a camera that feels good in your hands and inspires you to shoot, rather than just chasing the latest and greatest specs. Again, for me, that's a Fuji X-T5 when I need lightweight and a Sony a7R IV when I'm happy to lug about. The camera body isn't the issue. It's the glass that comes with it that is the real problem with the Sony system for me. Because I'm up hills, up mountains, and I'm carrying it all on my back. And is there really a great deal of image quality between the 2 systems there? Not really. Maybe at the extreme end of light, dark conditions, weatherproofing, that side of things. But the main point for me to get across here is I've seen much better photographs taken with much shittier camera systems in much more difficult situations. And so, for me at least, with regards to image quality, The technology isn't the limiting factor here. It's me, the meat element of all of this. At the end of the day, image quality is on a sliding scale. It's not black and white. It's a balancing act. The more that you prioritize it, the more time and effort you're gonna have to put into each and every photo. But as amateurs, you just got to find your own sweet spot as to what you want to get out of your photography. For me, I found a little bit of a compromise tends to go a long way. I'm not necessarily trying to be the next Ansel Adams, so I'm okay with sacrificing a little bit of technical perfection just to get the shot in so I can print it off and stick it on my wall. I'd rather reduce the technical elements of this by 10% and then spend 30% more time down the pub afterwards. And let me give you an example here. I might shoot at a slightly narrower aperture like f11 or f16 to ensure that I've got enough depth of field so I don't have to think about focus stacking my images. And sure, this might not be the perfect aperture to shoot from according to the tech specs of the camera lens, but it gets the job done, saves me having to faff around in Photoshop focus stacking my images later on when I get home, and it gives me more time to focus on the composition of the photo, the framing of the elements, and making sure that I'm not focus stacking just a crappy scene in the first place. I'm just trying to get something that's half decent that I can spend a bit of time editing because I enjoy that side of the process as well. And that's really what it's all about, isn't it? As amateurs, our goal should be to just get out there and just take more photos. Photos that capture a moment, a feeling, a story, all the fancy stuff if you're into all of that. And if that means sacrificing a little bit of image quality for the sake of actually being present and enjoying the experience and capturing something that we want to share, then friggin' so be it. It's like you're going on a big hike. Sure, you could spend all day analyzing the trail map and planning your route to make sure you got the right pacing so you get to your checkpoints at the right time, but sometimes it's more fun to just start at point A, try to get to point B, and just see where the path takes you. So I hope this has given you some food for thought when it comes to image quality. If you enjoyed this video, why not click the video on the screen right now and continue improving your photography.